Tonight on Unsolved Mysteries.
Imagine our great cities leveled in a blinding flash. North America consumed by flame. The entire planet enveloped in a massive cloud of smoke and debris. The agent of this mass destruction, a giant asteroid, perhaps undiscovered until it is too late. On Valentine's Day, our thoughts naturally turn to love. For centuries, men and women have been consumed by a never-ending quest for greater passion. Can aphrodisiacs make us better lovers? Or is it all in the mind and the heart? When Robert Dershel died of a gunshot wound, his family had little choice but to accept the police ruling of suicide. Then the arrival of a mysterious letter and the uncanny testimony of a psychic brought the case back to life. Join me for these intriguing new cases and much more on Unsolved Mysteries. Admit it. Unless you're Mick Jagger or Madonna, you probably wished for a magic potion that could transform you into the consummate lover or turn that aloof stranger into your adoring sweetheart. You're not alone. For the last few thousand years, from Afghanistan to Zanzibar, men and women have searched high and low for the perfect aphrodisiac. Wishful thinking? Or are there recipes for romance that deliver the goods? Modern science has a surprising answer.
One of the traditions in Europe was that newlywed couples would drink a wine made of honey every night, and this would be a way for them to help increase their energy during the first month of their marriage, and that's where the word honeymoon came about. And of course, we know honey is very, very high in B vitamins and amino acids, and is a very, very highly nutritious product, plus it gives the body energy, which is required also for healthy sex.
Even the straight-laced Puritans in colonial America had an aphrodisiac. The dandelion weed, which we now know is rich in vitamin A and other elements that jumpstart the engines of love. But since time immemorial, oysters have enjoyed a reputation as the food for lovers. For some, just a peek at the succulent mollusk can provoke thoughts of sex. Lab tests indicate that the oyster's fame is honestly earned.
Zinc is a mineral that's required for the production of testosterone, and testosterone is the most important hormone for sexual response in both men and women. And oysters have more zinc than almost any other food.
Though Dr. Watson has spent years studying aphrodisiacs, many patients who come to her Southern California office are not lovesick. At least that's not at the top of their list.
So, Charlie, are you having trouble sleeping?
Yeah, I'm only getting about...
Charlie was there because his 18-hour workdays had ground him down beyond exhaustion.
I'm rested, I get up and walk around, I can't get back to sleep. She starts to steer her questions to what are my activities like? Am I energetic? Do I exercise? You know, how's my love life? That was kind of an odd switch because most doctors don't take you down that path.
And how are these problems affecting you sexually?
Well, it's taken its toll on my relationship to the point where it's non-existent.
Dr. Watson prescribed a slower pace, plus a regimen of herbs and vitamins. But would they cure Charlie's exhaustion and rev up his love life? The transformation began during that first visit to the office.
I saw this little box of chocolates, and I just started nibbling away, and I'm hungry. And so I'm just popping these things, eating them and chewing away. Ah, great chocolates.
But these were not merely great chocolates. Dr. Watson has spiced them up with a mix of South American herbs, known for giving the libido a lift.
I started to eat these things, and I hate balling up the wrappers, and they're like, there's pocket size. I'm thinking, oh, this is great, little snacks for later, and I got a couple in my pocket.
Hi, excuse me.
Oh, hi.
How many of these chocolates have you eaten already?
Oh, I had a whole bunch. Why?
Really? A whole bunch. Because those are Dr. Watson's love potions.
Love potions? What's that?
Those are aphrodisiacs.
Aphrodisiacs, really?
Yeah.
Charlie took some of the chocolates to share with his girlfriend.
Okay.
He came home early, made dinner,
So
put on
delicious.
sweet music,
Thank you
and
so
hoped
much.
for the
Glad
best.
you like that.
That's
But
great.
we're not done yet. I have a little dessert for us.
Charlie was already halfway to paradise and probably could have left Dr. Watson's love drops on the mantel. But Charlie wasn't taking any chances.
Oh, chocolate hearts.
Not just ordinary chocolate hearts, though. These are aphrodisiacs.
Where did you get them?
About half an hour later, I'm sitting there, and she's playing with my hair, and I'm sitting there going, oh, it's working.
I'm so glad you didn't have to work late tonight.
She didn't say that she felt anything different. She said, oh, I just feel, normal. Well, I can tell you, she wasn't normal. She was better than normal. Cuddly, huggy, paying attention to me, and it progressed into a really nice, steamy evening, which was, after all, we could all use one of those once in a while.
The mind is the best aphrodisiac we have, yet there are really physical components that happen. I see it in my practice. I see men and women who really want to have great sex, but something's wrong physically, chemically, something's just not happening. And definitely when they take the herbs, which react in the body in that chemical process, definitely there's a change, there's an improvement.
When people say, you're taking an aphrodisiac, you're taking an aphrodisiac, isn't it all in your mind? Isn't it a placebo? And I look at them and I say, it's very possible that it is. I mean, there's tons of medical records that show people have been given placebo medicine and have cured themselves. But hey, who cares as long as it gets you there?
The wellspring of passion will undoubtedly remain one of life's great mysteries. As for aphrodisiacs, perhaps the most potent of all is the heartfelt phrase, I love you. Before flying off in search of romance, a few down-to-earth warnings. Prior to ingesting any kind of love potion, be sure to consult your physician. And remember, giving someone drugs or aphrodisiacs without their knowledge and consent may be a crime punishable by law. When in doubt, try a box of chocolates or a dozen roses. Coming up, it may be the greatest danger our planet will ever face. Giant asteroids and meteors drifting undetected through space. When or where one will strike cannot yet be predicted. But first, when a Marine helicopter assigned to transport the president crashes in Maryland, a self-taught aviation investigator launches his own search for answers. The following story originally aired on February 14th, 1997. Since then, there have been dramatic developments regarding the murder of Bill Cosby's son, Ennis. On January 16, 1997, 27-year-old Ennis William Cosby was shot to death while changing a flat tire. Only one witness, a woman, is known to have caught a glimpse of the suspected assailant. According to that woman, the man who authorities believe murdered Ennis was a white male wearing a light-colored knit cap. He was 25 to 32 years old, of average height and weight.
Our evidence at this time would indicate a random type of situation, a random crime, and again, the most logical motive at this time is robbery. Other scenarios may come as we move along and follow these leads that the public give to us. Right now, it appears that it's a random crime and that robbery is the most logical motive.
Here's what we know. About 1:30 a.m., Ennis Cosby pulled off the 405 freeway onto a lonely off-ramp near Mulholland Drive in Los Angeles. He called the woman on a cell phone and told her he had a flat tire. She went to the scene. She was sitting in her car when the suspect rapped on her window. She drove away in a panic. When she returned minutes later, Ennis Cosby was dead. His attacker was nowhere to be seen. During the next few days, police searched for more possible witnesses, sorting through hundreds of tips.
We have been contacted by several people who believe they may have seen something there, either seen Mr. Cosby before the shooting when he was still alive, or may have seen something shortly thereafter.
A Bel Air security guard gave police a description of a man in a blue hatchback he had seen in the area minutes before the murder. Police hoped that they had gotten a major break when they tracked that man to a mini mall in nearby Torrance, California, but it quickly came to nothing.
Well, we're always disappointed if a lead turns out that it isn't what we thought it was going to be or hoped it would be. On the other hand, it's a lead that becomes eliminated and allows you to go on and spend your time in the productive areas of the leads that we have not eliminated.
Police are certain someone knows a suspect. They are hoping that person will recognize this composite and call them with a critical tip.
There's a mother, there's a father, there's a sister, there's a brother, there are friends who know this suspect. They know that he committed this crime, and we want them to come forward. We have a brutal suspect, somebody that carries a weapon, somebody that is probably an experienced criminal and has committed these types of crimes before.
7 months have passed since a night TWA Flight 800 crashed into the Atlantic off the coast of Long Island, killing more than 200 people. Despite a likely ruling of mechanical failure, rumors about the cause of the tragedy have run rampant. Most incredible was a theory that the plane went down because of an accidental missile attack by our own military. Outlandish? Perhaps. But it's not the first time such charges have been leveled. Since 1993, similar rumors have swirled around the crash of a United States Marine Corps helicopter. But this was no ordinary helicopter. It was one of a small fleet used to transport the President of the United States. The President, of course, was not on board when the helicopter went down. But tragically, 4 crewmen were. As with Flight 800, the controversy surrounding the crash pits a theory of mechanical failure against an accusation of friendly fire, with one ominous twist: a secret weapon straight out of science fiction. It was an overcast morning in May of 1993. Shortly before noon, a Black Hawk helicopter flew over a wooded area near Washington, D.C. An archaeologist named Frank Owens and his assistant saw the helicopter fly by. Half an hour later, they discovered the crash site. This is the first time Frank Owens has agreed to be interviewed for national television.
We were driving down a road. When off to our right, I glanced and I saw the tail section of a helicopter in a clearing. We put it in reverse, we stopped, we jumped out. As we walked down the logging road, I could tell that this was a presidential helicopter.
The local authorities responded within minutes. The wreckage was strewn across an acre and a half of dense forest. All 4 crewmen were dead. Within an hour, a heavily armed unit of Marines secured the area. 3 months later, the Marine Corps released what is known as a JAG report. The official conclusion was that the crash had been caused by mechanical failure due to faulty maintenance. Portions of the report stunned Frank Owens. In the weeks after the accident, he has spent considerable time at the crash site erecting a memorial to the crew.
The JAG report indicated that all debris, all jet fuel had been taken care of. Everything had been removed in a very, very professional way. I found that not to be true.
Frank says he has the proof at his home, 43 pounds of wreckage that he collected at the site. When Frank decided to launch an investigation, he attracted the attention of several military and weapons researchers.
Yeah, that's one.
When you look at the crash of this presidential helicopter, the Black Hawk, and you compare it with the TWA 800 crash on Long Island Sound, here they have scraped the bottom of the ocean for months to recover the most minute pieces of debris from the aircraft. They've tried to essentially reassemble the airplane as completely as possible, and that's what they do in every aircraft accident investigation. And then you look at the fact that this is a presidential helicopter, makes you wonder, what were they thinking, what were their motives? It's highly unusual.
According to the JAG report, the accident was caused by improperly installed roll pins, 2-inch metal rods that connect the transmission to the engine.
After speaking to the individuals that changed these roll pins, they felt that they did it correctly. I feel that something else brought this helicopter down.
In talking to officials from the aircraft manufacturer, they say that if in fact that roll pin were misplaced, the aircraft wouldn't have flown, and that roll pin was replaced a month before the aircraft crashed.
In the interim, President Clinton had gotten on this helicopter and flown from Washington, D.C., all the way down to Norfolk, Virginia, and out to the USS Roosevelt and back to D.C., and it stretches all kinds of credibility, not to mention the laws of physics, that this helicopter would fly that long and that far if these pins had been improperly installed, as the Marine Corps says.
They took off here from Quantico 1246. They crossed the Potomac.
Frank Owens believes other clues can be found by studying the flight path of the helicopter.
And they continued in a south direction. I was here when I observed the helicopter fly overhead. This was my location. As they continued through this area here, at point 16, they made a dramatic change in course.
The thing I found most significant about the flight path of the helicopter was that the pilot was extremely experienced. He made an extreme U-turn, which indicates that he believed something was wrong and he was heading back. And then he passed over a field large enough to land a dozen helicopters in to crash in the trees just a few hundred yards beyond. It really kind of made me wonder if it was possible that vision could have been impaired.
I'm not certain what the cause of the crash was. I don't think it's what the Marine Corps claims. And there is physical evidence and circumstantial evidence that indicates the helicopter could have been exposed to microwave radiation.
If true, it is a stunning revelation. During the Reagan administration, a number of high-tech weapons were developed as part of the Star Wars initiative. Allegedly, one of the systems involved microwave energy, designed to disrupt electronic equipment in aircraft and missiles.
The helicopter, like the Black Hawk, would be far more susceptible to a microwave weapon because it would directly interfere with the flight control electronics. So you would immediately find that the helicopter may become partially disabled on its flying ability.
When you read about the physical symptoms of exposure to microwave energy, and there are a number of studies that have been done on this with fish and with people and animals, one of the first things affected is your vision, because the microwave energy heats the fluid in your eyes and you can't see.
Does such a weapon exist? Apparently, the Army has experimented with high-powered microwave technology, but most experts say an actual delivery system is not yet a reality.
High-power microwave weaponry does not exist, period. There are no high-power microwave weapons. The work that's being done now and over the last decade is to assess whether or not the military electronics of the United States and other powers are vulnerable to high-power microwave effect.
But others disagree. They believe such weapons do exist and may have been tested at this Army research lab in Blossom Point, Maryland, 5 miles from the crash site.
We'll go through to find all this wreckage.
Frank Owens and his colleagues believe a high-powered microwave is the only way to explain the most baffling aspect of the entire case: unusual burn marks on each of the victims' bodies. We asked Dr. Richard Grossman, a leading burn specialist, to examine several of the autopsy photos.
It doesn't have the appearance of an acid burn. It doesn't have the appearance of a flame burn. But I can tell you that that tissue is burned. But I can't tell you what caused it because I don't know.
The Marine Corps had attributed the marks to chemical burns from spilled fuel.
I don't think unignited jet fuel or any kind of aviation fuel would give you a contact burn like this.
The kinds of microwave pulses that are being studied as possible weapons are not in anywhere near the domain necessary to produce biological effects, burns on human skin. It takes a great deal of energy, and there isn't much energy in the microwave pulses that are being produced.
What caused the crash of the Black Hawk helicopter? Was it a mechanical malfunction? Or is the Marine Corps concealing a much different scenario? The accidental downing of one of its own helicopters by a top-secret weapon system. Just recently, Frank Owens informed us that he is indefinitely suspending his investigation out of respect for the victims' families. However, he remains convinced that the whole truth is yet to be uncovered. The Marine Corps stands by its original report and considers the matter closed. Next, a disturbing unsigned letter and a bizarre psychic vision lead to speculation that the death of a loving husband and father was not suicide. And later, catastrophic danger lurks in the infinite beauty of space. Are we on a collision course with a giant asteroid? We're as surprised as anybody when one of our earliest episodes solves a crime. Perhaps you'll recall this next story, first broadcast during our 4th season. It recently led to the identification and indictment of an alleged killer, thanks to DNA, a 7-year-old fingerprint, and of course, one of our viewers. Ethel Kidd was a youthful 61 when she retired to rural Virginia in 1988. Ethel looked forward to a simple country life, just down the road from her daughter and son-in-law, Joanne and Thomas Kidd. Thomas would be the first to notice something was wrong. It was the morning of April 12th, 1989.
My wife called her mother about 7:30, and the answering machine answered. And she said, "That's funny, Mom must have left early. Either she's on her way here to have a cup of coffee." About 9:30, I rode by, and I saw the car there.
It was a bad sign. Ethel hadn't answered her phone. If she was out, she would have taken her car. Inexplicably, a road atlas lay open in the front yard. Then another bad sign. Ethel never left the door unlocked.
Ethel?
Inside, concern turned to fear. There was no trace of Ethel Kidd anywhere.
Ethel, are you here?
8 days crept by. Then Ethel's body was discovered in the woods nearby. She had been sexually assaulted, strangled, then left tied to a tree.
The killer is extremely brazen. It's even as if he may have been taunting the police, saying, "Catch me if you can."
A suspect would indeed be caught. However, authorities would need the help of one very sharp-eyed viewer. Here's Keely Shea Smith with more on the improbable break in this case.
Bob, from the very start, investigators believed their best hope of identifying the killer lay with the atlas that Thomas Kidd had found in Ethel's yard. They were right, but it would take 7 years and several reruns of the story for their hunch to pay off. At the Virginia Bureau of Forensic Science, technicians were able to pull fingerprints from several pieces of paper that had been tucked into the atlas. But without a known suspect, the prints were useless. The critical break would come from what authorities judged to be the killer's own list of preparations for the abduction of Ethel Kidd. This is the suspect's checklist. Over the years, millions of viewers saw it, but one person actually thought the handwriting looked very familiar. The tipster provided a name, Edward Wayne Beverly. Beverly had lived in Burr Hill, Virginia, just a few miles from Ethel Kidd. Shortly after her murder, he abruptly left town. Virginia authorities finally located Beverly in a Tennessee prison, where he was serving time for armed robbery.
We compared fingerprints, and they matched to Mr. Beverly's prints. And on the victim's body, there was evidence there indicating sexual contact, and we compared Mr. Beverly's blood through DNA testing, and that matches up also. I'm convinced that we have the right guy that did this crime based on the evidence that's available.
Robert Dershel, beloved husband and father of 5, born 1923, died 1977. Dershel was killed by a single gunshot to the chest. Authorities called it suicide. For 16 long years, Dershel's wife and children had no choice but to accept the official ruling. All that changed suddenly and unexpectedly in March of 1993. Guy Dershel, one of Robert's sons, received a letter postmarked March 13th, 16 years to the day after his father's death.
It's a small, short letter in block, strange handwriting, and I read it once, and I read it the second time, and I was just totally flooded with emotion. It was as if I'd been kicked right in the chest.
The letter was short, just 35 words, but its stark message would turn the Dershels' world upside down. I have AIDS. I am dying. I must make my peace with the Lord. I killed your daddy 15 years ago. He found me in his bedroom. I had no choice. Please pray for me. A mean-spirited hoax or a sincere deathbed confession? Without a signature or return address, there was no way to find out. The Dershel family believes that this letter is genuine, evidence that Robert Dershel did not take his own life. What's more, they say corroboration came from an even more extraordinary source, a psychic vision from beyond the grave. This most unusual case began in the most mundane manner.
Oh, where's the iodine, honey?
Oh, it's in that small cabinet underneath the mirror.
Oh, I got that foot problem again.
March 13th, 1977 was a Sunday. It was 7:30 a.m., an hour and a half before Robert Dershel and his wife Ginny would head off to church.
I heard a sound, a loud sound, but I assumed it was the slamming of the back door because the doors and windows were all open, and when you went out to the pool, that did slam.
A few minutes later, Ginny went to the bedroom to dress. Her husband was bleeding from a wound to the chest. His shotgun lay nearby.
I bent down enough to know that he was dead. I was sure he was gone. I don't think I touched him. I called the police, and it seemed like they arrived immediately.
What time did you get here?
8:15.
Investigators found no evidence of a break-in, no sign of a struggle. Within 15 minutes, they concluded that Robert Dershel had committed suicide.
I say here the left shoe is off. I think what he did is he sat on the edge of the bed, put the shotgun up to his chest, pulled the trigger with his big toe.
Ginny argued that her husband had merely been medicating a foot ailment, but she argued in vain. It would take the arrival of the mysterious letter more than 16 years later to push authorities to take a second look. Within 2 weeks, the case was reopened. The Dershel family had never seen the original police report on Robert's death. They secured a copy and went over it word by word.
It was just so full of untruths, guesswork, interviews of people that hadn't seen my father in more than 2 years. Close friends weren't spoken to.
And the Luger's loaded.
Investigators had concluded that Dershel was driven to suicide by despair over an unsuccessful surgery years earlier.
The one interview that they probably weigh most heavily is from a nurse who hadn't seen him in 2 years, who gives a report about his health that is so far from the truth it's ridiculous. She portrays him as a bedridden vegetable, where he was a happy, fairly healthy man, had a social life, he still traveled and still was a productive salesman.
It was strictly investigated as a suicide. I don't think there were any fingerprints taken of the gun or any place in the house. And that was the biggest mistake they made, not investigating.
I can see where it would be difficult for a family to accept a decision like that when they feel that perhaps their loved one may have been a victim of some other circumstance. But in law enforcement, we have to deal with what the evidence tells us.
The original investigation was conducted by the Dunedin Police Department, which dissolved in 1995. The Pinellas County Sheriff's Office later reviewed the available case files.
There seemed to be no sign of struggle, no forcible entry, no broken windows, disarray of any description in the bedroom where this encounter allegedly occurred, which again was one of the, gives us more belief that this was a suicide.
Without additional evidence, the ruling remained suicide. But for Robert Dershel's family, the case was anything but closed. Indeed, it grew more and more bizarre. In February of 1995, Jenny's sister Fran traveled from Florida to California. Fran, who is now deceased, told Jenny about an unnerving encounter on the train, an episode that defies explanation to this day.
Fran?
Well, yes.
Was your husband a doctor?
The young woman was a total
Was his
stranger,
name John?
but she revealed an uncanny familiarity with Fran and the Dershels.
Well, then your husband's name was Earl.
Yes, that's right.
Well, they're here. With Bob.
Bob?
Yes, your sister's husband. And he was murdered about 15 years ago.
Murdered?
Please, don't be frightened. I'm not a mystic or anything of that kind. My father passed away a number of years ago, and he sends me messages from the other side. I think it's best that I write this down so that you can keep it with you and give it to your sister Jenny.
Fran said that the woman wrote down her psychic vision on a napkin.
My first reaction to psychic was, I didn't believe in psychics. I'm sorry. And yet, the more I heard,
I sit on the Amtrak train.
I had to say I believe in this.
I see a picture in my mind regarding the murder of your sister's husband, Bob. I see a narrow door opening with a gun case showing. And your sister's husband is going to another cabinet near the mirror to look for foot treatment for athlete's foot. He looks up and he sees a stranger in the adjoining room. Alarmed, the robber fights with Bob.
The things that were written by the young lady on the Amtrak train were startling in that some of this information wasn't anywhere to be found. It was just too real. It was as if this person was in the room.
She's made no effort to gain from it. There's been no approach to us, which you would expect if there was a hoax. And I honestly believe it was a situation that took place that I can't explain in the reality of this world. It's kind of spooky.
Bob Derschel died at 54, seemingly well before his time. Perhaps it was his choice, made for reasons known only to himself. Or perhaps Bob Derschel's life was taken by a stranger who wrote from the deathbed, asking for forgiveness.
In my own mind, my father is a victim of murder. And I would like to be able to tell my children without a question that this is what took place. And I would like the people who know my father and the community to know what happened.
There may be somebody out there who was talked to by the killer, revealed something in prison to an attorney, to a parent, to a friend. It's a small world, and stranger things have happened. That's one of my hopes, is that somebody out there can fit the last piece of the puzzle into place.
The unsigned confession letter was mailed from Tampa, Florida, and postmarked March 13th, 1993. When we return, 65 million years ago, a giant meteor slammed into Earth, creating a new ice age and ending the reign of the dinosaur. Will it happen again? Could humankind survive such a cosmic calamity? Imagine the Manhattan skyline flattened, the sprawl of Los Angeles pulverized, the entire country devastated in the blink of an eye. An atomic nightmare? No. A natural disaster unparalleled in human history. A disaster no one can predict. It will come from outer space. July 16th, 1994, a frightening preview. Huge fragments of a giant comet called Shoemaker-Levy slammed into the planet Jupiter, causing the most massive chain of explosions ever witnessed by man.
Well, out of this 21 series of fragments, there were actually 15 that survived that we saw hit the planet. And of those, about 4 or 5 were the big ones. When each of those largest fragments hit Jupiter, it had about the same energy as if you had taken all of the nuclear bombs in the world.
Dr. Gene Shoemaker is co-discoverer of the Shoemaker-Levy comet.
Put them all in one big pile and set them off all at once. That's about 10,000 million tons of energy.
One of the impacts on Jupiter created a cloud of debris as large as Earth. This cataclysmic event immediately brought troubling questions to mind. Could it happen here? And what if it did? Could life as we know it survive in a vast cosmic shooting gallery? Fortunately, the odds are in our favor. Astronomers estimate that here on Earth, celestial disasters on the grand scale of Shoemaker-Levy occur only once every 100 million years. But that's not to say we're entirely safe. At this very moment, there are literally thousands of asteroids and comets streaking through the solar system. Is it possible that one the size of Shoemaker-Levy could collide with our planet? Not only is it possible, it has already happened more than once. This is Meteor Crater, 3 hours north of Phoenix, Arizona. It was here, long before the dawn of civilization, that an asteroid slammed into the desert floor. Scientists estimate its velocity at more than 40,000 miles per hour.
Meteor Crater is the first recognized impact crater on the Earth. It's 4,000 feet across, about 600 feet deep. It was formed by an iron asteroid about 50 yards in diameter, and it was formed very close to 50,000 years ago. But if you'd been there, you wouldn't want to have been too close. If you had been standing where Flagstaff is today, 40 miles away, you would have probably been knocked over by the shock wave. Buildings would have been collapsed.
But meteor activity on Earth isn't just consigned to ancient history. Early this century, in 1908, a fireball raced through the sky over Siberia. It exploded above the remote area of Tunguska, spraying debris with the force of 1,000 atomic bombs.
To get a good idea of the devastating effect of this impact event, a city that I know very well, Houston, has surrounding it a highway, a beltway highway, 610 loop. Everything inside the 610 loop would have been flattened and charred. All the buildings, all the infrastructure, nothing would have been standing inside that area. Anyone who lived there would have been dead.
Incredibly, such devastation did occur on a worldwide scale at least once in the history of our planet. It was 65 million years ago, during the reign of the dinosaur. A gigantic meteor, some 5 miles in diameter, smashed into Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, 75 miles east of where the city of Veracruz now stands.
The surface expression would not lead you to believe that there is an impact crater there. You have a nice flat Yucatan Peninsula with really no topographic signs that a crater 180 to 200 miles across exists below.
Virgil Sharpton has created this three-dimensional map depicting the Chicxulub crater immediately after impact. His detailed description of that catastrophic event is chilling and very possibly prophetic.
Well, immediately before the impact, we think you would see a comet. Keep in mind that this object is traveling at about 140,000 miles per hour. You don't have a lot of time between the time it goes into the atmosphere and the time that it actually strikes the Earth. Much less than a second, obviously.
The impact at Chicxulub was heard and felt in every corner of the Earth. Instantaneously, the ground surged upward. Countless tons of rock and dust formed a massive curtain, hundreds of miles across and hundreds of miles high.
As this dust started to make its way into the atmosphere, it would block the sunlight completely. It would be as dark as night. As some of this material started to re-enter the atmosphere, however, things would begin to light up, not by the illumination of the sun, but by the illumination of countless meteorites, shooting stars streaking through the upper atmosphere.
According to Sharpton, these balls of fire touched off a raging inferno that spread across the entire Western Hemisphere. The smoke then rose to join with the impact debris, blanketing the Earth with an impenetrable cloud.
Darkness was achieved almost instantaneously, and this cloud would basically expand around the Earth in a very short period of time.
For the better part of a year, there was no sunlight. What emerged was a new ice age with its own catastrophic consequences. Roughly 75% of Earth's plant and animal life perished. The most prominent victim, the dinosaur.
The consensus is today that dinosaurs were doing very nicely up until this event, and immediately after this event, they were gone, and they never came back.
There's a large enough risk that I think we really should pay attention to it. The hazard of impact in terms of loss of life on the Earth, you don't take out just 100,000 lives lost. You could wipe out half or more of the entire human population.
If an event similar to the one that formed Chicxulub happened tomorrow, then there would be no civilization. There is no doubt about that. There would be widespread devastation, death like we have never even imagined. And there's no protection for it. It's just one of those things that we have to live with. Fortunately, however, events like Chicxulub are extremely rare.
At present, there are only a handful of scientists worldwide actively scanning the skies for near-Earth asteroids. Just recently, scientists discovered the Hale-Bopp comet, which will pass close enough to Earth next April to be seen without a telescope. Despite our extremely limited warning system, it is calming to note that there is no record of anyone ever being killed by an asteroid. Join me next time for another fascinating edition of Unsolved Mysteries.